There's something almost no one talks about when it comes to getting rich. And maybe it's already happening to you right now without you even realizing it. It has nothing to do with making a lot of money. It has nothing to do with investing. It has nothing to do with inheritance or luck. It has to do with internal, silent, almost invisible signs that appear long before money ever shows up. And the strangest part is that when these signs start to appear, the person usually feels worse, more anxious, more confused, and more insecure than before. They look at their own life and think they're going backward, when in reality, they're going through one of the most important moments of their financial journey. Maybe you've already felt this, a constant discomfort, a strange feeling that continuing to live the way you are has become too heavy. It's not desperation, but it's not comfort either. It's like something inside your head no longer accepts certain choices, certain spending habits, certain routines. Things that once felt normal start to bother you. You go to the grocery store and feel angry about spending money on pointless stuff. You pay a bill and feel a different kind of tightness in your chest. You get your paycheck and instead of relief, you feel fear. Fear because you realize the money comes in and goes out too fast. Fear because you understand that if nothing changes, the future will just be a tiring repetition of the present. And here's the point. Almost no one understands. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's one of the first real signs that you might get rich. Because most people who will never become financially wealthy don't feel this. They're numb. They spend, complain, survive, and repeat the cycle without deeply questioning it. When something goes wrong, they blame the government, the boss, the economy, or luck. And they keep living the same way, year after year, waiting for something magical to change on the outside. The person who starts walking toward wealth, on the other hand, goes through a very specific and very uncomfortable mental phase. It's the phase where they lose the ability to pretend everything is fine. It's when the brain starts asking questions it never asked before. Simple but dangerous questions. Why do I work so hard and stay in the same place? Why does every month feel like I'm starting from zero? Why am I afraid to look at my balance? Why do I avoid thinking about the future? These questions don't bring immediate answers, but they create something much more powerful: rupture, the silent break of financial normality. At this point, many people turn back. The pain of facing reality is too great. The person prefers to distract themselves, spend, compare themselves less, think less. But whoever goes through this phase without running away is without knowing it, developing a mindset that is a prerequisite for getting rich. Because wealth doesn't start with money. It starts with the inability to accept a financial life without control. It starts when confusion turns into discomfort, when discomfort turns into awareness, and when awareness begins to demand change. Maybe you're listening to this and thinking it sounds too pessimistic, but it's not. It's deeply realistic. Getting Hishi, for most ordinary people, doesn't start with excitement. It starts with exhaustion. Exhaustion from making mistakes, exhaustion from repeating patterns, exhaustion from not understanding where the money goes, exhaustion from always living on the emotional edge, even when the bills are paid. This exhaustion is a clear sign that your mind has started operating on another level, a level where surviving is no longer enough. And then comes a second sign, even more uncomfortable, that almost everyone misinterprets. It's when you start feeling strange in environments where you used to feel comfortable. Conversations change. Certain habits of friends start to bother you. Jokes about spending everything, about living for today, about not thinking about tomorrow start to sound empty. You don't feel superior, but you feel out of place, like you're out of sync, and that hurts. Because humans hate feeling mentally alone. At this moment, many people sabotage themselves to belong again. They spend to keep up. They ignore the discomfort so they don't seem boring. They convince themselves they're overreacting. But someone on the path to wealth feels this distance as an internal alert. It's not that others are wrong. It's that you've started thinking differently. And thinking differently at first is lonely. It's uncomfortable. It's confusing. But it's necessary. This second sign shows that your mind has started separating immediate pleasure from future security. Even if you don't yet know exactly what to do, your brain has already realized that certain choices carry an emotional cost that's too high. And when the emotional cost of spending poorly outweighs the momentary pleasure, something very important changes. You start protecting mental energy. You start protecting peace. you start protecting the little bit of control you're trying to build. Here, something curious happens. You still don't have extra money, but you already act like someone who understands its value. You don't show off. You don't talk about grand plans. You don't feel confident. On the contrary, you're afraid of making mistakes. But that fear doesn't paralyze you. It alerts you. It makes you observe more, think more, question more. This mental state is rare. And it's exactly what, in the long run, separates those who will get rich from those who will just earn more and stay broke. Most people think the signs that someone will get rich are visible, external, loud, but the real signs are silent and internal. They are changes in perception, changes in tolerance, changes in what you accept as normal. And if you're going through this strange period where nothing feels financially comfortable, even when nothing has explicitly gone wrong, that's not bad luck. It's transition. In the next chapters, I'm going to show you other, even more specific signs that directly affect your daily decisions, your automatic behavior, and the way you react to money without realizing it. Signs that, when ignored, make a person return to the old cycle, and when understood, create a silent shift that changes everything over the years. There is a third sign that almost no one notices because it doesn't seem positive at first glance. In fact, it usually scares people. It's when you start becoming excessively aware of risk, not investment risk, not the risk of losing money in the stock market, none of that. It's basic, everyday risk. The risk of depending on a single source of income, the risk of any unexpected event becoming too big of a problem, the risk of getting sick, losing your job, needing someone and not having anyone. Before, these thoughts might have crossed your mind, but they were pushed away with ready-made phrases like, "I'll deal with it later. That won't happen to me. Everyone lives like this." Now, they don't go away. They linger. They show up at night when you lay your head on the pillow. They show up when you see someone going through an unexpected hardship. They show up when you realize you have no room for error. And this creates a different kind of anxiety, quieter, more mature. It's not panic. It's responsibility starting to be born. This sign shows that your brain has started operating in a more strategic mode, even if you don't yet have any clear strategy. You begin to realize that stability isn't the absence of problems. It's the ability to absorb impact. And that realization changes everything. Because from that point on, you start making small, different decisions. Not out of forced discipline, but out of self. You avoid certain expenses, not because someone told you to, but because they make you vulnerable. You start valuing margin, space, breathing room, even without knowing exactly how to create it yet. What's curious is that this phase comes with a feeling of fragility. You feel exposed, as if you've woken up to something that was always there, but that you pretended not to see. And here's the crucial point. People who are going to get rich almost always go through a phase where they feel financially more fragile than they actually are. Not because they've gotten worse, but because they see more clearly now. Ignorance brings a false sense of security. Awareness brings discomfort, but it also brings power. While many people use money to numb fear, you start wanting to use money to reduce fear. This inversion is silent, but profound. It's when money stops being just consumption and starts becoming an emotional tool. Even if there's still little of it, even if it's still lacking, its function in your mind has already changed. And that's a turning point. From there comes the fourth sign, which is even more counterintuitive. You start feeling less desire to talk about money and more desire to understand money. Before, maybe you complained more, compared yourself more, got more irritated with people who earned more. Now, no, there's a new silence. You observe more than you comment. You realize that many conversations about money are just venting, not solutions. And without noticing, you start stepping away from that noise. That doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you more financially introspective. You start seeing patterns. You start noticing how people make impulsive decisions and then justify them with ready-made phrases. You start seeing how money disappears, not because of big tragedies, but because of small repetitions. And most importantly, you start seeing these patterns in yourself without defending yourself so much, without playing the victim so much. This is a very strong sign that you might get rich, because most people spend their entire lives defending their own financial mistakes. They create stories to feel less guilty. You start doing the opposite. You start taking mental responsibility even without having all the answers. You start thinking, maybe the problem isn't just how much I earn, but how I behave when I earn. That thought changes the trajectory of an entire life. At this point, something interesting happens. You start feeling a strange kind of respect for money. Not fear, not worship, respect. You understand that it amplifies who you are, that it dwells ni fix disorganization, it just exposes it, that there's no point in earning more if your mindset stays the same. And that respect makes you move more slowly. Think twice. Not get excited about magic solutions that protects you from big mistakes in the future. These signs don't appear in complacent people. They appear in people who are going through an internal transition, a transition that doesn't get likes, doesn't get applause, doesn't give an immediate feeling of victory. On the contrary, it brings silence. It brings doubt. It brings loneliness. But it also builds a foundation. It builds maturity. It builds a kind of tense calm where, something needs to change, even if you don't yet know exactly how. And maybe that's exactly where you are right now, in a phase where you don't feel poor, but you don't feel safe either. You don't feel lost, but you don't feel in control either. This in-between zone is where most people quit because it's not comfortable. It's not fun. It's not clear, but it's exactly this zone that precedes the biggest financial turnarounds in an ordinary person's life. In the next part, I'm going to show you the final signs that appear in daily, almost automatic behavior. And that determines whether this transition will turn into real growth or just another phase of frustration. And most importantly, I'll show you why some people feel all these signs and still never get rich, while others use this exact discomfort as fuel to build something solid and lasting. There is a fifth sign that almost always goes unnoticed because it's too simple. It's not grand, it's not inspiring, and it doesn't make for a nice conversation. It's when you start being bothered by your own lack of clarity. It's not just lack of money, it's lack of understanding. Not knowing exactly how much comes in, how much goes out, why it goes out, where it goes. Before, this confusion was swept under the rug. You knew you didn't have control, but you accepted it as part of adult life. Something normal, something inevitable. Now that lack of clarity starts giving you an almost physical sense of discomfort, like driving a car at night without headlights on an unfamiliar road. Even if nothing is going wrong at that moment, the mental insecurity is constant. And that makes you want light, information, order, not to become an expert, but to stop feeling vulnerable. This is a very strong sign that you might get rich, because people who never get rich learn to live with financial chaos. They adapt to the mess. They build routines on top of confusion. Those who start walking toward wealth develop an intolerance for prolonged disorganization, not because they like control, but because they understand, even intuitively, that clarity is freedom. You start wanting to understand before acting. You start realizing that making decisions in the dark is too exhausting. That always reacting to money drains mental energy, and that mental energy is a rarer resource than money. This thought changes your posture. You no longer want to chase miracle solutions. You want the basics working well. You want predictability. You want to know where you're stepping. Actually, this moment, many people get frustrated because they understand the problem, but don't yet master the solution. And that frustration is dangerous. Some go back to denial. Others drown in information and do nothing. But those who truly have the potential to get rich use this frustration as fuel for something simple and powerful, starting small, even without motivation, even without excitement. And here comes a silent shift that defines everything. You start doing small things right, even without feeling any pleasure in them. Not because you became disciplined, but because you got tired of suffering mentally, tired of not knowing, tired of improvising. You start realizing that the biggest weight in financial life isn't lack of money. It's lack of predictability. It's never knowing whether things are under control or it just seemed to be. This behavior is extremely rare. Most people only act when they're motivated or desperate. Those who will get rich learn to act for clarity. They learn to organize, not to earn more, but to breathe better. They learn to structure their financial life to reduce anxiety, not to impress anyone. And when money enters this kind of structure, even in small amounts, it starts producing something almost no one values: peace of mind. That's when it becomes clear why so many people earn more money and still feel broke. Because the problem was never just income. It was always the mental state. It was always the emotional relationship with money. You start understanding this not as theory, but as lived experience. You feel in your body the difference between spending without thinking and spending consciously, between receiving money and letting it slip away and receiving money knowing exactly what its role is. And maybe hearing all this, you're wondering whether these signs guarantee that someone will get rich. They don't. Nothing guarantees that, but they show something much more important. They show that the person is ready to get rich, emotionally ready, psychologically ready. Ready not to self-sabotage when money starts to appear, because money, when it arrives before maturity, becomes a problem. When it arrives after, it becomes a tool. Most people want to skip this phase. They want shortcuts. They want tips. They want numbers. They want investments. But they ignore that. Without this internal transformation, any external gain turns into sand slipping through their fingers. You're going through a boring, silent, unglamorous phase. But it's exactly this phase that builds a foundation. A foundation not to depend on luck. A foundation not to live on the edge. A foundation to make better decisions when it really matters. In the next chapters, I'll start showing how to turn these signs into something concrete, without magical promises, without complicated language, without ready-made food. I'll show how ordinary people use this exact discomfort to create simple systems that completely change their relationship with money over time. It's not about getting rich fast. It's about getting rich without losing your mind in the process. There's a specific moment in this journey when the person realizes something that's even a little scary to admit. They realize their financial problem isn't just lack of money, it's lack of emotional structure to deal with money. And that hurts the ego. Because it's much easier to believe everything would be solved if the salary were higher, if the boss valued you more, if the economy helped. When you start seeing that your own decisions, small and repeated, carry enormous weight, the feeling is one of exposure, like someone turned on the light in a messy room you avoided looking at. This moment is decisive, because two reactions are possible here. The first is self-defense. The person starts justifying themselves, comparing themselves, minimizing. They tell themselves it's not that bad, that everyone lives like this, that no one really has control anyway. And with that, they protect themselves from pain, but also from change. The second reaction is quieter and rarer. It's when the person accepts the discomfort. They don't like it, they don't feel good, but they accept it. And that acceptance changes everything. When you accept that you lack clarity, you make room to build clarity. When you accept that you make mistakes, you make room to make fewer mistakes. When you accept that you're financially exhausted, you stop romanticizing the mess. This is a silent sign of financial maturity that almost no one notices. It's not excitement, it's sobriety. It's not motivation, it's lucidity. And this is exactly where many people who seemed financially promising get stuck. Because this process is boring. It doesn't give dopamine. It doesn't give an immediate feeling of victory. On the contrary, organizing, thinking, reviewing habits makes you realize how much time and energy you wasted before. And that creates grief. Grief for the money that passed, for decisions that won't come back, for opportunities you didn't even realize you lost. Those who can't handle this grief go back to autopilot. Those who can move forward. From this point on, your relationship with time changes. You start thinking less about the month and more about a sequence of months. Less about immediate relief and more about reducing future stress. Not because someone taught you this, but because you felt the cost of always putting out fires. You start understanding that the problem isn't earning little in a bad month. It's living your entire life without margin for a bad month. And that realization creates new behavior. You start respecting the basics. Simple things that once seemed silly start to carry weight. Knowing exactly how much you need to live. Knowing which expense is fixed and which is a choice. Knowing how much your peace of mind costs. And that doesn't make you boring. It makes you more aware. You start realizing that many people confuse freedom with lack of planning, when in reality it's planning that buys freedom in the long run. At this stage, you still don't feel rich. Far from it. But something fundamental has already changed. You stopped lying to yourself. And stopping lying to yourself is one of the biggest financial leaps a person can make. Because while you lie to yourself, you repeat. When you see clearly, you can choose differently. You won't always choose right, but at least you'll choose awake. Little by little, almost without noticing, you start creating small systems. Nothing sophisticated, nothing pretty. Simple things that work, even when you're tired. You start setting aside money before spending, not after. You start deciding the purpose of money when it arrives, not when it's already gone. You start creating barriers between you and impulse. Not because you became disciplined, but because you learned that relying only on willpower is asking to fail. These systems seem too small to change a life, but they're exactly what accumulates effect over time. While many people live on daily emotional decisions, you start reducing the number of decisions you need to make, and that frees something precious: mental energy. Energy to think better, work better, choose better. Money starts taking up less space in your head, even if there is still little of it. And here, something happens that almost no one expects. The more control you gain, the less obsessed with money you become. Because money stops being a constant threat. It becomes part of the background, not center stage. And that allows you to see opportunities that used to go unnoticed. Not magical opportunities, but be aware, increase income, adjust expenses, negotiate, plan. Simple things that only appear when the mind is no longer in survival mode. That's why many people who earn little but have clarity grow faster than people who earn a lot and live in chaos. It's not intelligence. It's not talent. It's mental state. It's the ability to think in the medium term without panicking. It's being able to say no to the present without feeling like you're missing out on life. It's understanding that too much immediate comfort charges extremely high emotional interest in the future. If you made it this far and identified with this, there's a good chance you have these signs inside you, not as a guarantee of wealth, but as potential. And potential only turns into results when it's treated seriously. Not with haste, not with comparison, not with guilt, with consistency, with simple systems, with imperfect decisions repeated. Getting rich for most ordinary people is not an event. It's a long process of stopping the bleeding of energy, stopping living in the dark, and stopping treating money as an enemy or a savior. It's turning money into a tool to reduce stress, expand choices, and buy time to think, time to live, time to make fewer mistakes. If you understood this, you're already ahead of many people. Not because you know more, but because you feel differently. Because you no longer accept living financially on autopilot. Because you realize the real leap isn't financial, it's mental. The money only follows later. And now I'm going to ask you something simple. If this video made sense to you, leave a like, so I know this kind of content helps you. Subscribe to the channel, because here we talk about money in a way no one else does, without fantasy and without guilt. And if you made it to the end, comment the word asterisk, clarity, just that word, clarity. That way, I know you watched until the end and that this content spoke directly to you.